What is up, everyone? Welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about cartoon cars. Alright, as I said in the intro, guys, welcome. It's another video. Today we're going to talk about some cartoon cars, but before I get into that, I would like to say a big thank you to my friend and musical genius, Zaylen Tallis, for cranking out the most amazing intro music for me. So if you didn't notice, it'd be hard not to, but the new intro that I've put together for you, the guy who did the music is my good friend Zaylen. I've known him for basically my whole life, since I was probably, I don't know, 4, I guess. We grew up together in the same area in Ballajura. His oldest brother is the same age as me. We all went to school together. So I had a chat to him a couple of weeks back about the possibility of throwing together some intro music for me. We threw around a few ideas, and I left it up to him and said, listen, this is the brief. I want something that's a little bit synth, something that goes a little bit crazy at the end, and that's what he put together for me, and it's brilliant. I'm in love with it. So thanks very much, dude. It's turned out great, and I've managed to, I think, at least put together a intro edit that sort of matches the music reasonably well, I think. So thanks again, mate. Also, the link to his YouTube and socials will be in the description below. He's amazing. So if you are into music, or even if you're not, if you're into comic books, he does a lot of themed music for a lot of indie artists around the world. Globally, sort of in the United States, a lot of stuff in the US. He's working on a project for me at the moment around Talos of Sparta, which is going to be super exciting as well. So fingers crossed that'll start to sort of pop up shortly so I can have a listen to it. I'm really excited about that. So go and check his channel out. He is brilliant. If you need someone to put together some music for your own channel or for a project that you're working on, super friendly, really competitive rates, and the guy's just a genius. So thanks again, dude. Much appreciated. The other thing I would also like to do before I get into it is a little shout out to a bunch of people in my family and friends circle who've had birthdays over the last month, specifically the last probably week or two. So it's a big shout out to my mum. She had a birthday last weekend, or the weekend before. Happy birthday, mum. Also, a big shout out to my niece and nephew, Blake and Charlotte, who just turned 4 last weekend. Happy birthday to you guys. Love you guys. Also, a big shout out to my other nephew, Ashley. It's his birthday last week as well, or this week just gone, sorry, I should say. And last but not least, a big shout out to my good friend Crystal, who, what can I say? You and Bobby have given me, a place to work out of, which has been brilliant. So thank you very much for you guys, and just a brilliant person in general. So big shout out to all you guys. Love you all. Thanks very much. So without further ado, so what I'm going to take you through today is a little bit different. So some of you guys may or may not know that another part of the business, my business, another part of what I do on a daily basis is I do caricatures of people's cars. And today I'm going to take you through the cheats version of a car that I did recently for my Redbubble store. I've been on a bit of a mission to increase the inventory on my Redbubble for the last probably month or so. And if you haven't seen it, that again, link is somewhere. I don't know where it is, but if you can find it, please go and check it out. If you have someone in your life who's into cars or whatever, and there's something on there that takes your fancy, then please check it out. Anyway, the Redbubble store is a drop shipping store where I upload designs that I've done of certain things. In this case, the store is basically all cars. And this particular car is I believe they came out in 1988. Aussies will know the car very well. For anyone who's international, you may or may not know it, but Aussies will certainly know what it is. It's the Walkinshaw. It's the VL SS Group A, done by Walkinshaw Racing. It's affectionately known by Aussies as the Walkie. Essentially, what it was a GM's VL Commodore of the age, which came out in sort of, I think, 86, 87, somewhere around there, which was a family car, 4-door family car. But Holden decided they wanted to make something a little bit special to go Group A racing with at that time. And that was around the time where a lot of cars were coming out. Actually, I think it preceded the times where you started to see Sierras popping up, you started to see GTRs popping up, and I don't know, I suppose for me it was it's probably the most iconic Holden, at least it's arguable, but at least in my opinion, it's probably the most iconic Holden ever made, and that's a big call. But for me, it's that quintessential. I've never really wanted to own a Commodore or own a Holden as a kid growing up around Japanese cars a lot, but when this thing came out in magazines, I was like, holy crap, that's the coolest car I've ever seen. It's like a Batmobile. It's got a huge big wing on the back of it and all that sort of stuff. So the reason why I'm saying that it's the cheats way of doing it is because in this particular drawing, because I wanted to crank it out as quick as I possibly could, I used a car that I'd already drawn. In this case was a VN Commodore, which was the car that came out after the VL a couple of years later, 91, I think. Anyway, I used the drawing that I'd done of that. Because the proportions of the car are essentially the same, I use that as an underdrawing instead of doing my own gesture and underdrawing for the VL. So what you'll see is I'm using that as a template to create the VL on top of. Because, like I said, the proportions are basically the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit play on the video and I'm going to talk over it as I go. So for whatever reason, I don't know why, sometimes I'm in these types of mood, I decided to use a red pen or a red pencil or whatever to draw this particular car with. Sometimes when you're doing a drawing over another drawing, in the case that I'm doing now, when you use blacks or greys, you can have a tendency to get lost and you're sort of competing, the lines are competing with each other a little bit on top of lines, on top of lines, on top of lines that are all kind of essentially the same shade or a variation of the same shade. So what I've taken here is the line drawing from the VN that I did. It's actually the drawing I did of the VN is actually a couple of years old now, from when I first started going sort of a little more heavily into the auto art stuff. So I've taken the line drawing of that and used that as the basis for the line drawing of the Walkinshaw. So what I'm doing is just roughing in the basic lines of everything, all the different features on the car, and you'll notice there is a picture there that I'm working off. So what I'm doing as I'm drawing is I'm flicking back and forth between what's that little feature, what's that little feature, what's that little feature, what's that little feature, the same as you would in any other drawing class, like a live drawing class or whatever. So I'm quickly throwing the lines in. So this video playback is at 2x speed. So from start to finish, this drawing was about 25 or 26 minutes to get the rough done. The inking process takes a lot longer because you sort of tend to want to get it a little more perfect when you're inking. But the basic layout would have been, to do it with all the lines and everything, was about 25, 26 minutes. So if I had have done the first gesture drawing and then done this part, it would have been another probably half an hour on top of that. So then that takes you into an hour just to get the drawing to a place where it's serviceable, to a place where you can use it as something that you want to ink. And then the inking process, depending on, how well the ink is flowing that day, how well your hand is moving and all that sort of stuff that day. The inking process sometimes can take a couple of hours. Sometimes if you're having a shit day, it can take you most of the day. Those are the days that you're sometimes just better off calling it quits and not even worrying about it and just coming back, and having a look at it again. So what I'll commonly do, and a lot of artists do, especially people who are working digitally, because it's much easier to do it when it's a digital drawing, is I like to flip the canvas, and you'll notice I just flipped the canvas then. So typically what can happen is when you're looking at a drawing that you've been doing, even if you're just looking at it for 10 minutes when you've been doing it, it starts to look normal, right? So you're so used to looking at it that it just looks normal. But what happens is when you flip the canvas the other way, it really starts to highlight the actual problems with the drawing. So when you look at it, the way that I first draw it, I was like, oh yeah, it's starting to look good, blah, blah, blah. So then I'm like, okay, I'm going to flip the canvas and make sure that what I'm seeing is not an illusion or not in my head, because I've been looking at it for the last 5 or 10 minutes. Flipped it, and all of a sudden, all the glaring problems instantly, just like that, sort of start to show straight away. So I started to see that I think the headlights and the bumper were a little bit too low down, and all that sort of stuff. There was a few issues with the proportion and all that type of thing. So when you flip your canvas, it gives you an opportunity to really sort of see where the weak points in the drawing are. So I'll make the change, and then I've just flipped it back again. And now once I flip it back, I look at the drawing and go, yeah, that looks heaps better from that perspective as well. So then I make the decision to keep moving on. So I'm going to start putting in a few more bits and pieces. And sometimes when you cut things and stretch things and stuff, all that sort of stuff, you squash them, change shape and proportion, it throws a whole bunch of other lines off. So you've got to go back and put in the other lines. So the lines of, the bonnet and the guard where the creases sort of line up had to be changed. The lines of the bonnet bulge had to be updated, all that sort of stuff. So it's a good habit to get into if you're a digital artist. If you're working traditionally, you can still do it, but it's a little bit harder depending on how thick the paper is that you're using. If the paper is thin enough, you can actually just turn the paper over. So you're looking at the back side of it, hold it up to a light source, go to a window, a fluoro in the kitchen, whatever, and then have a look at the drawing backwards that way. And then you'll start to see, all right, okay, what I'm looking at is a little bit off here, or this needs to be changed, or maybe if I can adjust the proportions or whatever, you can see those. And you don't tend to see them when you're looking at something the same way for hours on end, especially, So here I am. Again, I'm just adjusting proportion. I felt like the glass house was a little bit small, a little bit squashed up, so I just extended it a little bit higher. What I think I'm doing subconsciously is I'm trying to get, and you guys will have to Google it because my explanation will be poor, but I'm trying to get the proportion between the glass and the steel in the doors and stuff like that closer to the golden ratio, which is from memory 1 to 1.618, which is like this magical ratio that makes everyone's art look fantastic, apparently. So it is a real thing, though. It's proportioned. So if you're interested, Fibonacci, I think, was the guy that created it or invented it or whatever, discovered it. The golden ratio is 1 to 1.618. So similar to the rule of thirds, which is close to 1.618. Where everything looks better in thirds, you can sort of apply that as well. So what I'm trying to do is get the proportion a little closer to that when I'm adjusting the glass house, the window area on the car. When you're exaggerating things as well, when you're making a caricature, which is essentially what I'm doing now, I'm taking a real thing and stretching it and squashing it and turning it into something which is completely disproportionate. In real life, the wheels would probably stick out the bonnet. The wheels would be up inside the cabin. It's not real, obviously. So, but that's the fun of drawing. You can take anything you want and just create anything you want out of it, right? So, but what I'm doing when I'm doing that, is creating that cartoon, is it sometimes can present difficulties because playing with proportion is fun, but sometimes when you go too far, you don't quite get it right. It throws the entire drawing off. So it's a bit of a fine line. And as most of you out there know, when you're doing stuff like that, which is or anything similar to this, it's not as easy as we might make it look. It's real easy to get that wrong, and you're making thousands of decisions with every little movement that you make of that pen. So it is an easy thing to get wrong, and that's why I'm constantly going back and checking things, and I'm changing, proportion. All right, we're back. Hopefully, that's not going to be too much of an issue. QuickTime decided to crash again. So if you're listening, Apple, sort your shit out, for crying out loud. All right, where was I? Proportion, changing things around, all that sort of stuff. So I'm constantly trying to go back and do that, make sure that everything's starting to look right. And you'll see here, I've decided, all right, it's sort of looking a little bit too squashed. I need a little bit more room to put in some of the features that are on the car, like all the plastic that's on the side, on the doors and the side skirts and all that sort of stuff. When you've twisted the proportions, squashed things up, made the wheels huge, you sort of do tend to lose that middle third of the car, which can be problematic if you're doing things like race cars that have got stickers and that type of stuff. It's really difficult sometimes to fit all that stuff in and then make it look right because you've just distorted the actual car so much. It looks cool, but there are some inherent problems in there as well that you need to be mindful of when you're doing it. So the other thing with a lot of this type of stuff when you're drawing, caricatures of anything, whether it's a human or a car, like it is in this case, is to be aware of that. Sometimes people get up. It happens more with humans, so it's probably just a short sort of point. But people can get upset with you when you stretch and squash them and exaggerate certain things and certain features. So be mindful of that as well when especially if you're doing something that's got a human being in it. They sometimes can get upset. But so starting to now look like an end product. I'm starting to see, the car's looking really cool. There's still some issues with the proportion. So you'll also notice a lot of cars from the 80s. 70s things were all curved, and then as it went towards the 80s, things started to get boxy and square again, which I think was a massive step backwards in car design in the 80s, but it is what it is. We still got some super iconic cars like, the VL or, the DeLorean, for example, is the boxiest coupe you've ever seen, but it's cool. Anyway, so you'll notice that in the 80s, there's still a lot of cars that have really long straight six-cylinder engines in them. So there's a lot of cars with really long bonnets in the 80s, and you don't see that as much these days. So you'll also notice as well, there's lots of straight lines and there's lots of little trim pieces that are straight and all that type of stuff. So a trap that I probably still occasionally fall into, but sometimes I see other people do it as well, is the little things, your straight lines. Because the car is being drawn slightly in perspective, you'll notice there is a little bit of a difference in the angle between the floor and between, the line where the bonnet is and then the line where the top of the roof is. It's slightly in perspective, so it's almost like you're looking from a worm's eye view at the car. That's the way I like to draw them. And it's really easy to get your perspective lines wrong, especially when you're freehand drawing something, which again will just completely throw the car off, or whatever it is off. If you're drawing a human in perspective too, it'll throw it off. But because there's so many straight lines that are not an organic line, it's dead straight. Trim pieces, bumpers, headlights, in this particular case, the bonnet, bulge in the bonnet, type of stuff. So straight, super boring, but it's really easy to get that wrong if it's not straight enough or the relationship between the straight lines isn't right. It'll completely ruin your drawing. So we're starting to get close to a finished product here. I'm roughly putting in the wheel nuts and all that sort of stuff, how I want the actual wheel to look on the finished product. On rear-wheel drive cars like this one is, I tend to make the back wheel exaggerating the dish, which is the distance between the face of the wheel and the outside of the wheel. Put a little bit more dish on there because it makes it look cool, a bit more aggressive. And there we have it, guys. It's pretty much, that's technically it'd be stage 2 normally of getting a drawing done and cartooning a car. So you'll also notice, just quickly I'll touch on it, that I did go through and draw a couple lines up the middle of the bumper, the middle of the grille, and then the middle of the bonnet to make sure that the symmetry was where I wanted it to be, and it turned out okay. So last minute adjustments on the rear wheel arch, again, to bring in some of those features from the car which are getting missed a little bit when you sort of squash everything up and put such a big wheel in there. Those details get lost, so you've got to try and sort of squash them in there somehow without making it look weird. And I think I turned out pretty good. So at the end of the video, I'm going to leave a little picture of the final drawing after I've colored it and all that type of stuff for you guys, so you can have a look at it. And if you want to go and purchase some of the merchandise, then go to my Redbubble store and have a look. There's VLs, there's Japanese cars, European cars, all sorts of different stuff on there. But that's pretty much it, guys. I'm about to call it quits for the day. That's the quickest 12 and a half minutes of my life. So thank you again for tuning in. If you haven't done already and you've just happened to have caught this by chance or whatever, liking, commenting, subscribing goes a long way towards helping the channel grow. So please do that. It would be much appreciated if you could. But that's it, guys. It's a bit of an overcast Sunday, but I'm going to try and get out and go for a ride and get to the gym and enjoy some of this while it's not raining, because it's, raining again, which is weird. That's it. Thank you again for tuning in. I'll see you all next time. It's the Killustrator signing off.